All right, welcome everyone. My name is Kara Copeland. I'm the Executive Director for the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries. We just want to thank you for attending our webinar today, looking at the economic impact of relief nurseries here in Oregon. So if those of you, hopefully if you're joining us, you know what a relief nursery is. I'm just going to give a short intro, and then I'm going to hand it off to our researchers to talk about the study that they've done. So relief nurseries have been in Oregon since 1976. We currently have 38 sites around the state. We are serving 2,300 children and their families. A relief nursery has three components, basic components. We have a therapeutic classrooms for children. We have in-home parent coaching, or what we call home visiting for families. We do parenting education, and then we do what we call wraparound supports. So that might be clothing and diapers and food. That's case management, referrals to services. Sometimes we provide mental health therapy, substance treatment therapy, peer services. Lots of different things happen at relief nurseries, parent-child interaction events. They're really a family resource center for families raising children ages 0 to 5. So that said, welcome to looking at what is the economic impact when we invest in relief nurseries. I'm going to introduce two folks for you today. Andrew Dyke and Angelica True from ECONorthwest were the lead researchers in this study. They had a team of people that they worked with that they will share with you. But I'm going to hand this over to them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let them go ahead and take it away. I would say also, if you have questions and would like to put those in the chat, we will try to monitor the chat, but we will be answering questions at the end of our time together. So without further ado, I'll hand off to ECONorthwest.
Yep, thanks, Kara, for that introduction. So yeah, what we want to do today is talk a little bit about the research Kara was alluding to, and talk about the economic benefits of Oregon relief nurseries. And it's part of, I think, trying to address a broader question of really being able to communicate why investing early in children's lives matters. There are a wide range of programs that provide critical services, and a lot of times the true sort of net benefits of those services are not fully understood and therefore not communicated out to funders, to communities, to stakeholders, et cetera. So the kind of analysis we're doing can be useful, and we've done this for a number of different projects, can be useful for programs that either haven't had a rigorous evaluation conducted or don't have the resources to conduct such an evaluation. So pretty exciting project where we think the results are pretty fascinating, and as Kara mentioned, are happy to address any questions that come up at the end of the presentation. So just a quick agenda. I'll spend a minute or two just introducing ECONorthwest, and Angelica and I give a little bit of background on the project, and then turn it over to Angelica to talk about the methods we use to calculate the benefits of relief nurseries, and a little bit about the literature review of research on programs similar to relief nurseries that we used as the basis for analysis. And then I'll talk you through the results, and then we'll take some questions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, we're both from ECONorthwest. The firm was founded quite a while ago in Eugene. We're now headquartered in Portland. We work in a wide range of different areas, but sort of fundamental to what we do is answer questions like the questions that Kara posed to us, which I'll articulate in a minute. And that's really to help our partners, help our clients, help the public better understand and communicate the benefits and costs and trade-offs associated with specific programs, with specific policies, et cetera. And next slide. And Angelica and I both work in ECONorthwest's education social policy area, where we work in a wide range of areas within that umbrella, anywhere from childcare and early childcare and education to K-12 post-secondary education, workforce analysis, policy analysis, and program evaluation of a wide range of different programs in and outside of education. I will just say a couple words about Angelica too, who's been with the firm for quite a while as well. She's been doing a lot of work recently in particularly the germane area of childcare and early education, as well as a lot of work on houselessness, both topics that have really come to the fore since the COVID-19 pandemic. And now I'll move into the specific reason we're talking here today. We were approached by Kara, by the Relief Nursery Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries, to answer a couple of questions and really specifically to assess the potential benefits associated with the services provided by Oregon's Relief Nurseries. And to answer those questions, we developed a methodology to quantify the potential life cycle benefits to participants and cost savings to taxpayers associated with these programs. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. There's a lot of jargon in there for those that are not working in this realm. So we talk about potential life cycle benefits, and there's a few words within that. These are potential benefits because, as sort of I alluded to earlier on, relief nurseries have not had the resources, time, et cetera, to conduct a rigorous long-term evaluation of its services. And so what we did was look at research on programs similar to the relief nurseries and the rigorous evidence associated with those programs and apply that to relief nurseries. So what our findings are, for that reason, potential. We have not proven impacts, but they're still highly suggestive. And so we look at life cycle benefits. These are benefits that are not just those that accrue to, say, children while they are being served by relief nurseries. These are benefits that might happen 5, 10, 15 years after receiving services, but that have been shown to be associated with services like relief nurseries. And we look not just at benefits to participants, but also the associated cost savings to taxpayers, things like reductions in spending on the criminal justice system, on foster care, on abuse and neglect investigations, because relief nurseries have done their job and made lives better for the children and families that have received services. We do think the resulting analysis can support relief nurseries' goal of expanding access to services, reorienting Oregon's child welfare system towards a more preventative approaches. Again, this is the role for this kind of analysis, is to help communicate those potential benefits, even if they don't happen this year, even if they don't happen next year. But there are proven benefits associated with investments in early childhood today. So next slide. So specific questions we addressed, which you can probably guess already. First question was, to what extent do relief nurseries reduce public sector spending on foster care or other government services? And again, we examined evidence related to a wide range of services. Second question, what other quantifiable life cycle benefits do relief nurseries ultimately generate for children and families that they serve? And we'll give you a flavor for what those specific benefits are as we're moving through the presentation. Next slide. So I've already said this first bullet here, but again, relief nurseries have not had a rigorous long-term evaluation that would be necessary to state with confidence and certainty that these benefits will emerge. But what we have done is apply external research to relief nursery programs to provide an estimate of the potential magnitude of these benefits. But it does rely on a number of assumptions about the comparability of these programs that we're using as inputs to our analysis, and assumptions that relief nurseries, participants in relief nurseries are comparable in magnitude. And I will say here, we might be being conservative or we might be being optimistic. The extent to which relief nurseries are doing a better job than some of the programs studied, or that they're focusing on specific areas more than the comparison programs, might suggest a different actual benefit. But again, we're left with the literature that exists, which is what we used. And I said these next two bullets here, but we were extrapolating from existing analyses. And again, the programs that we're basing our analysis on are not identical to relief nurseries. We would need to do more research to understand how the differences might affect results. One way to do that is through a long-term rigorous evaluation, or even a less rigorous evaluation over a longer period of time. The results that we came up with are, I think, can lay the foundation for that work. If they suggest that if relief nurseries are operating like similar programs, a lot of benefit will be realized, and that should be, I think, impetus to put a finer point on that, evaluate the program, and better understand those benefits. And I will turn it over to Angelica to describe our approach.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So our approach basically can be split into 3 prongs, which are summarized here on this slide. So we began with a literature review, and that was essentially looking across all the extant literature for programs and intervention services that were similar to what Relief Nurseries provide. And then we looked at the various long-term benefits of those programs to participants. We looked at how rigorous the studies were, and we also examined the service reach. So for example, the age of the children being served, the types of families served, the demographics served, the amount of time that children were enrolled in programs, to help determine whether or not the comparison programs that we are finding in the literature were good fits. We also, after selecting sort of a short list of comparison programs, we worked with the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries to pare that list down to get 2 programs that were similar in content and programming to Relief Nurseries, focusing on the 3 principal components of Relief Nurseries that Kara mentioned earlier. So the therapeutic classrooms, the outreach care, and the parental education components, and outreach crisis intervention as well. Those kind of 3 primary components. And then we also looked at benefit cost analyses from the Washington State Institute of Public Policy. We looked at which programs out of the identified comparison programs had cost benefit analyses from the WISIP, or the Washington State Institute of Public Policy. And what the WISIP provides is just a standardized methodology that we can use to extrapolate to our own findings. So it was just useful for us to have those WISIP studies on our comparison program so that we could use those findings in our own work. So after we looked at the WISIP findings, we applied those findings to our own work, adjusting for inflation, participant age, program duration, and program intensity to help extrapolate those results and apply them to Relief Nurseries and estimate the potential lifetime benefits for participants in those Relief Nurseries. So just a quick summary of the literature review that we conducted. So we looked at a lot of different studies, a wide range of studies on early childhood intervention programs, or ECI programs. And most of these studies found positive results for participation in these programs, i.e. children and families that were participating. The benefits of the participation was outweighing the cost of those programs, at least in the long term. And a meta-analysis of 115 ECI programs found that investments produced were $2 to $4 in benefits for every dollar invested. So that means for every single dollar that was put into the program cost-wise, there were $2 to $4 in benefits for participants, taxpayers, indirect recipients of benefits, et cetera, at least in the long term. So in other words, long-term benefits are outweighing costs. And there are certain studies that estimate very high returns for ECI programs. So for example, Heckman et al. In 2019 estimated a return of $6 for every dollar invested in the ABC Care program. But it's also worth noting that this program was a full-time program providing comprehensive services to children and families. So it was a little bit more intense than some Relief Nursery programming. So that may have led to a slightly higher estimate for a return on the dollar. So that is one reason why it's really important for us to make sure that when we are looking at these comparison programs, we're looking at those that are similar enough to Relief Nurseries that we can accurately extrapolate the results. And then just some backup for why it's important to invest in children early, going back to Heckman's work, who is a Nobel Prize winning economist. He highlights that it's really important to look at high quality birth to 5 programs and focus on long-term rather than short-term benefits. So a lot of the studies that we looked at and a lot of the research that is out there focuses on short-term academic gains and other short-term gains of participating in ECI programs or programs like the services that Relief Nurseries provide. And while these short-term benefits are great, it kind of ignores long-term benefits that might exist. So for example, a participant might be in Relief Nursery services from the age of 0 to 5 or 2 years or whatever. And during that time, they might see improved family functioning, improved physical health, better short-term outcomes that happen immediately. But down the road, many years later, they might also get better grades, be more involved in school, later go to college, when maybe in absence of the program, they might not have gone to college, and then have a higher paying job way down the road. So these longer term benefits can manifest many years down the line, but are also really important for thinking about the true value of a program. And what Heckman also found is that children who received treatment had significantly better life outcomes. So like I was just speaking about, so getting better jobs, having higher earnings, better educational outcomes than those who did not receive center-based care or those who received lower quality care. So looking at our general methodological approach, summarized this a little bit earlier, but we focused on 3 primary components of Relief Nurseries, looking at those with similar programs identified through WISIP. And we adjusted WISIP estimates to quantify potential benefits of Relief Nurseries and adjusted for child age, program duration, and other factors. And as Kara summarized, the 3 principal Relief Nursery components that we looked at were the therapeutic classrooms, the outreach services, and the home visiting and parent education. And the considered ECI programs that we first examined are listed here, and there are also total benefits to participants and taxpayers listed per participant on the side there. Through discussions with OARN, we eventually selected these 2, the Nurse Family Partnership and the Child Parent Center, as our 2 primary comparison programs, mainly due to the program components that they had, so home visiting, early education programs, parenting education, and outreach services, and due to the fact that there was rigorous available research that we could use in our own estimates with these programs. So just a little bit more information about these programs. The Nurse Family Partnership connects specially educated nurses with first-time mothers from pregnancy through the child's 2nd birthday. And the Child Parent Center programs provide classroom instruction, family visitation, and other supports to economically and educationally disadvantaged children from pre-kindergarten through 3rd grade. And I'll pass it back to Andrew to talk through some of the results and take us to the end of the presentation.
Great, thank you. And so what I'm going to do here is I'll start with not results so much, but just sort of a couple of slides describing the caseload that we're talking about, so a couple of characteristics of the children and families that Relief Nurseries served, and then I'll talk you through the results and what we found in terms of the net benefits of these services or the potential net benefits over the life cycle of the participants. And Jocko, if you move to the next slide. Okay, so just a couple of demographic characteristics. We focused on fiscal year 2021, 2022. We actually examined data over a much longer period of time just to look for trends and differences in caseloads, et cetera. But our analysis of potential benefits focused on the most recent fiscal year of data that was available. That's 2021, 2022. In that fiscal year, Relief Nursery services were provided to about 1,700 families and a little over 2,300 children. The charts show a couple of characteristics of those children. By geography, about half were from urban areas, about 42% from rural areas. Much smaller, not surprisingly, because the areas are less populated, but 4% from frontier areas, and then another final 4% that we don't really know where the child came from due to limits in the data. In terms of racial and ethnic demographics, a little bit more diverse than the population of children in Oregon right now. 47% were white, 24% Hispanic, and then you can read on down the list, about 4% American Indian or Alaska Native, 4% Black or African American, 1% Asian, 1% Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, and then I skipped the less specific categories. 12% were not disclosed, so we just don't know. Race or ethnicity, 8% multiracial. So these characteristics did not directly affect our analysis, but it's important to understand these characteristics for a couple of reasons. One, which I alluded to before, and Angelica actually as well, that the caseload served by the programs that were used to inform our analysis were not necessarily the same as the caseload served by Relief Nursery. So it's important to at least be aware of potential differences there. In part because one could reasonably assume that differences in outcomes and benefits, we're going to see differences in outcomes and benefits depending on where children live and the type of broader environment they grow up in, and the composition of their families and the circumstances facing those families. So again, these did not affect our analysis directly, but are important to keep in mind as we're moving through the results. Next slide. Okay, so when I said Relief Nurseries had not had an evaluation done, that does not mean, or sorry, has not had a long-term evaluation. They have done some evaluation work, and you'll see a hint of that in the next slide. And they have a lot of data which did inform our analysis and can be used for different types of evaluation. This slide should give some sense of the challenges faced by families upon their entry into the program. The Relief Nurseries has a long list of family stressors that children may be exposed to in their home environment. Families are coming from stressful situations. That's the point of the program, is to help resolve some of those stressful situations. Families must have at least 5 stressors to enter into the program. On average, children's families are facing many more. And what you're looking at on the left is the average number of stressors faced by programs in that fiscal year 21-22 for a couple of different segments of the population that we used in our analysis. You can see from the chart that 0 to 2-year-old children, the younger half of the population, they're from families with slightly more stressors than older children. And the children that enroll in the therapeutic classroom component of Relief Nurseries tend to be from families with slightly fewer stressors, although across the board, the average number of stressors appears relatively high. And I'll give you a sense for what those stressors are in the next slide. Okay, so in terms of not long-term, but potentially short-term evaluation, we looked not just at stressors on the front end, but also the number of stressors experienced by a family as they're leaving the program. And that's what you're looking at here. Just we selected a number of potentially telling factors. There are a large number of stressors that we're not showing here. But what you can see from the chart is that for the selected stressors, and this is true for many others, families at exit were experiencing on average fewer stressors than at entry. Clearly, Relief Nurseries are not solving all of families' programs. That's not reasonable to expect, but we do see evidence that family situations are improving and have improved by the time they're leaving. Our analysis picks up at the point where this kind of evaluation drops off. We can move into the next slide. Okay, so just sort of qualitatively, and then we'll move into the numbers, get to the bottom line. Based on the research that Angelica described, we identified a number of different life cycle benefits that the Relief Nursery could provide. And we broke those into 3 different domains. 1, family functioning, the family's operating better, less dysfunctional, and we might expect reduced incidence of abuse and neglect, reduced chance of children being placed outside the home subsequently, and other family functioning improvements. We might expect improvements in health of the participants both immediately and over a much longer period of time. For example, improved physical and mental health for both children and parents as problems are addressed and potentially resolved while with the Relief Nursery, but also improvements over a longer time period for things like reductions in smoking or other risky behavior that are plausibly associated with those mental health improvements, those family functioning improvements when participants are younger children. We might expect improved social emotional development, not just while children are enrolled in the programs of Relief Nurseries, but over a longer period of time as the earlier conditions build and provide benefits throughout a child's life. In terms of education, in terms of education, based on the literature, we might expect a lower likelihood of grade repetition, increased likelihood of high school graduation, and subsequently increased likelihood of pursuing higher education and potentially higher career earnings down the line. There are many others. Our full report identifies a number of other specific benefits, but this should just give you a flavor for what we're looking at. Now we can move to that next slide. And as alluded to before, in addition to improving the lives of participants, Relief Nurseries might potentially reduce the use of public services through a number of different avenues that you can probably guess. If we're seeing improved health outcomes, we might expect lower use of public health services. If we're seeing reductions in child abuse and neglect, fewer child foster care placements, we would also expect to see cost savings for those entities. And this ultimately frees government resources for other purposes. And in addition, as I suggested from the prior slide, we would expect to see higher earnings as children move through their educational experience and into the workforce, which leads to higher tax revenue as well, which also increases public budgets, providing resources for other purposes. And so what we did is use the literature and the estimates provided by that literature, quantitative numbers, applied those to the information we had about the Relief Nursery caseload, and calculated the total net benefits to participants over a long period of time. And as you'll see in the next slide, these benefits amount to millions of dollars in present value terms. Move on. So bottom line, aggregate results for a cohort of 882 first-time Relief Nursery participants in 2021-22. You'll probably recall that the full participation in that fiscal year was over 2,000, a little over 2,300 children. To be consistent with the literature, what we wanted to do was look at first-time participants, children who were starting Relief Nurseries for the first time, so that we can get a clean look, compare those children to the caseloads of other study programs. And these evaluations would take a similar approach. They would look at participants in a program who at their first entry, and compare outcomes over a long period of time to a similar group of children who did not enter the studied program. So we followed a similar approach, looked at 882 first-time Relief Nursery participants and calculated the benefits. Other fiscal year 21-22 participants would be providing benefits, receive benefits to themselves and providing benefits to taxpayers and so on at large. Those would be part of an analysis for another cohort. So you want to keep that in mind. So what do we find? On net, so this is net of the cost of the program, we calculated potential benefits of between $9.7 million and $18.5 million for the whole cohort. We also calculated results for different components. Specifically, we calculated potential benefits by child's age and by whether they participated in the more intensive therapeutic classroom or not. And what we found there was similar benefits overall, but slightly higher benefits in the optimistic range for the TECP participants. On average, we found net benefits of $2.10 to $3.01. For the TECP participants, that's the therapeutic classroom, benefits of between $1.92 and $3.78. So I will say that looks like probably a pretty big range. If you back up to the left side, there's almost a factor of 2 between our low and our high estimate, although we would say that both estimates suggest large potential savings. That range is important, and it reflects to some extent uncertainty about the comparability of Relief Nurseries to other programs. We came up with some high and low scenarios in our estimates. It also partly reflects uncertainty in the research literature. As most of you are probably aware, when we see a research finding, even if it's very rigorous, there's often a confidence interval, a high and a low range. And so it's not surprising that based on that literature, we would find a relatively high range in our estimated benefits. But again, the results are large in magnitude. Finally, on the right side here, is part of a separate analysis due in part to the limitations in the data. We estimated cost savings to the foster care system itself of between $1 million and $1.3 million associated with an anticipated reduction in child care placements over child's early years and teenage years. This is one area where I would say this is potentially a conservative estimate, in that Relief Nurseries place a lot of emphasis on preventing child abuse and neglect, on preventing foster care placement, whereas the studied programs, while they addressed these issues, did not focus as explicitly. And so again, that's an area where I think we may well be being fairly conservative. Next slide. So to pull it apart a little bit, again, to give you sort of a sense for the magnitude of specific benefit. These are benefits not net of costs, but just to understand the types of categories and the size of the benefits that are feeding into that aggregate net benefit calculation. We can break the benefits into 4 different buckets. 1, future labor market earnings, whether it results from better jobs generally, regardless of education, or better jobs as a result of more advanced education. These benefits refer to increased future earnings to the individual and taxes paid to the government as a result of those higher earnings. Have a range here between $12.7 million and $18.6 million. Note again, those numbers are somewhat different than what you would expect based on what I told you overall. The prior slide was about net benefits. These are total benefits. Moving down the table in terms of K-12 education, and these are benefits that come from things like increased high school graduation, reduced special education, find a range of between $5.6 and $8.2 million. In terms of crime and criminal justice, we would anticipate reductions in crime. This provides benefits not just in reductions in need for criminal justice systems charges, but also benefits to people who would otherwise have been crime victims but are not as a result of this reduced participation in crime. Range there of between $2.2 and $3.2 million. And then finally, as another example, reductions in child abuse and neglect. Fairly obvious what that is. We found a range in savings of between $2 million and $2.8 million. All these benefits are in present value terms. We adjusted the research based on inflation from the time of the study to the present day. To calculate these benefits, we looked at the anticipated changes this year, next year, 2 years out, et cetera, over a participant's lifetime, and pulled those benefits back and put them in 2022 terms. Okay, next slide. So in terms of where those benefits, who benefits, we have, you can see on the right, we estimate that 38% of those benefits accrue to taxpayers. Again, this is related to increased tax collections and reductions in the use of social services, criminal justice services, et cetera. Similar magnitude, another 40% of the benefits accrue to the individuals, and then a final 22% accrue to others. And these others are benefits such as reductions in the effects on people who would otherwise have been crime victims, but are not as a result of the services provided by the Relief Nurseries. Next slide, please. So just to sort of wrap things up and conclude here, 3 main points here. 1, Relief Nurseries could easily pay for themselves. If Relief Nurseries provide benefits like the proven benefits of similar programs, we would expect benefits in present value terms of between $2 and $4 for every dollar spent, with slightly greater benefits associated with TECP participants. Again, that's the therapeutic classroom. And basically what that says is if you invest more in Relief Nurseries now, we would expect those investments to more than pay for themselves over a long period of time. In addition, part of that calculation, Relief Nurseries could lower public costs to a significant degree. Mentioned a lot of different types of benefits that Relief Nurseries might provide to state agencies and therefore to taxpayers that are above and beyond those that would accrue to participants. As I've alluded to and suggested several times, it's important to communicate these life cycle benefits because these are not things that show up right away. They don't show up this year. They don't necessarily show up entirely next year. It may take a long time to fully realize that $2 to $4 for every dollar investment. At the same time, to the extent that Relief Nurseries operate as effectively as well-studied programs, the investments pay off. And this research makes the case for those investments, whether it's Relief Nurseries or other early childhood programs. And as you can imagine, certain benefits like the higher labor earnings are some that do take a long time to emerge, suggesting the need for, if one wants a conclusive statement about the benefits of any particular program, it takes a long time to do that, but it is feasible. And short of that, this kind of analysis helps make the case for specific services and for more detailed analysis of the data that are available. And with that, I will wrap up and we can move on to answering any questions. And it looks like there reading.
Andrew, there was one question in the chat. Martha, I'm not sure if this got answered, but if you could talk a little bit more about what's meant by life cycle benefits. I'm not sure if Angelica answered that.
Yeah, well, I'll summarize quickly, and then we can, if there's more follow-up needed, please say so in the chat. So again, by life cycle, we're looking at, think of benefits in two ways. One, we can think about the immediate or sort of proximate benefits of Relief Nurseries, in that one of the main goals is to stabilize families that are at high risk of falling apart, high risk of needing intervention from from the government, from foster care placements. One could think of sort of immediate benefits as anything Relief Nurseries do to reduce the chance of those things happening in the very near term. But sort of I alluded to, we need to think about, well, both of us, I think, need to consider longer term benefits as well. These are benefits that accrue over a long period of time and are not as easy to see because they take a long time to materialize and require research and analysis to uncover. And it's really those, by life cycle benefits, we mean those longer term benefits, improvements in educational outcomes, reductions in smoking behavior for teenagers that were Relief Nursery participants as young children, et cetera. Oh, and there was a question about, I see, definition of a life cycle. Yeah, the definition is not identical across programs studied, but most of these analyses were based on programs of, well, they were all based on analysis of program participants who were young children when they received services, and follow-up period followed either through sort of mid-teenage years and or into the labor force. I will say the analyses were not through a full life cycle. As you can imagine, there have been no studies that have lasted for 40, 50, 60 years that would allow us to apply, that we could apply to the Relief Nurseries. So there is still a bit of speculation in some of the longest term life cycle benefits. So typically mid-teens, I think we may have had some that went into the 20s.
Great, thank you, Andrew. We also have a question from Athena. She says, when looking at foster care savings, is that the specific child engaged in the TCP not entering the foster care system? Or is it also including children involved in TECP classroom, having their children, not quite sure, having their children be involved in foster care?
Yeah, so I think I can address that. So what that estimate is based on is estimates from the literature on the reduction in the share of participants that would have a foster care placement, not just immediately, but over their sort of childhood. And that reduction is a percentage point reduction. So we would apply the research-based percentage reduction in foster care placements to the cohort of children that participated in Relief Nursery. Through the large amount of data that Relief Nurseries have on their children, they have identified children that had prior foster care involvement. There can be follow-up that helps identify children who are involved in foster care subsequent to participation. But the research that we've done is not tied to specific children. It's tied to an assumption and research supporting that assumption on the reduction in the likelihood that any particular child in the cohort will be placed in foster care.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And then we also have a question. I think it might have just been sent directly to me, but it's from Meredith, and it asks, could you please quickly summarize again the method of collecting the data of the improvements and benefits? For example, was that where the comparing of other programs came in? And I think I can take that one. So essentially what we did is we looked for other rigorous studies out there that existed in the literature that were trying to estimate life cycle benefits for programs that were similar to Relief Nursery services. And of course, no program out there was completely identical to Relief Nursery services, but we focused on the three main program elements that Relief Nurseries provide. And then we also, through discussions with OARN, narrowed down the comparison programs to those two programs that we shared with you. So the child parent centers and the nurse family partnerships. And that's where the comparing really came in. So essentially we're looking at, rigorous research that's been conducted for these other programs across a long period of time which we don't necessarily have for relief nurseries, but because the programs are similar enough, we can apply and adjust the benefits calculated from those similar programs and estimate what relief nurseries are potentially generating.
Are there other questions about this study? I have some wrap-up thoughts. I would love for folks to put in the chat too other questions you have or next steps that you would think of. I have a little list of my own next steps, but again, I think this thought community, those of you here are invested in relief nurseries or at least curious. We invite that curiosity as well. So please feel free to add whatever is on your mind in the chat. Give just a second for other questions. Allison, I see your question about how children are recruited to participate in nurseries. I'll give a short response, but would love to connect with you individually. In short, most relief nursery families come to us themselves. In new communities in communities where relief nursery is new, those relief nurseries might rely on referrals from pediatricians, from social workers, from the Department of Human Services, or self-sufficient, either on self-sufficiency or child welfare side. But as a relief nursery is engaged in community outreach, and families typically are coming to us. And I think we have some data somewhere around kind of that referral pathway, but anecdotally, I can tell you that that is the pathway. And we have a referral link on our website, on Orrin's website, and we can direct all referrals to the local relief nursery as well. Yeah, other questions?
Yeah, it looks like one more question from Lisa here. Is there potential to study our economic impact as an employer business as well as social impact? So the very short answer is yes. And you don't have to answer this. I don't remember if when we were initially talking about this project, if we had talked about that component, but it is certainly possible. I think for the purposes of this study and the reason for commissioning this study, that looking at the social benefits, the life cycle benefits is a much more important piece of the puzzle in communicating overall. So again, the answer is yes. And I will say that the process of conducting that sort of formal economic impact analysis is very similar conceptually to what we did on the participant benefit and public cost savings side.
Great, and I do just want to address Cynthia's question about a written report being made available. So we will provide the slide deck, or at least Kara will send out the slide deck through her network. And there's also a summary report that has a lot of this same information in it as well that we can include in that package along with the slide deck and the recording.
Yeah, and again, all of those things we will send out to everyone on our mailing list, and also those who've registered, and they will be situated on our website. And you can connect with us on our socials too. And we'll have that information, that you can forward on to folks in your network.
So, and then I see a question from Tim on whether we can apply the same methodology to our own organizations. And I'm not sure if that's relief nurseries or other types of programs. Apologies, Tim. I'm not sure what you're from, but hello,
Yeah.
Nice to meet
He
you.
is from a relief nursery in Eastern Oregon.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So that's I mean, yes to both, regardless of that. But for this particular project, we did not, just due to the project constraints, did not get into specific estimates for specific programs, but it would certainly be possible to disaggregate the data. I will say that those disaggregated results would come with the additional caveat that we might expect different outcomes for an Eastern Oregon program than a Portland metro area program. But that's not to say it shouldn't be done, and it can be done. We just did not do it for this project.
Mm-hmm. I think the other potential concern might be just the number of children served. We might see an even wider range in estimated benefits than what we calculated for all children served. The relief nurseries, just because the sample size there will get pretty small, but yeah, definitely possible.
I see Pablo had a question specifically related to educational benefits. I don't know if either of you looked into that or can address that specifically.
Well, it's from and Angelica, you can fill in if you have additional thoughts. In the written report, we do break out the benefits, sort of K-12 versus post-secondary. If the question, and I'm not sure you can take it a whole lot further than that, but if the question's about what's causing this, I think it's, sort of drawing the connection to improve family functioning for young children and the improvements in their brain development, their social and emotional learning, social and emotional development that translate into better educational outcomes further down the road. So that may or may not answer the question. I'm happy to try to follow up more if not, but Angelica, I don't know if you had more thoughts on that.
No, I don't think so. I think that summarizes it pretty well.
I can address Maureen's question about ORAE and ODHS. We did not, I worked with ECONorthwest. You can tell me if you worked with ORAE. I will say, Maureen, that ORAE has done one study on a long-term impact of Relief Nursery using one of our Relief Nurseries. We're hoping to follow up with them. Their study, and we have not done a webinar on that, showed after 9 years after Relief Nursery services, 90% of the children remained out of foster care. So that was a really specific study with one Relief Nursery. We have not done a statewide impact study with ORAE, but I'll let you two address any interactions that I don't think we had. I don't know that we had with ODHS or ORAE around this particular study.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have worked fairly extensively with both entities, but not for the purposes of this project. We did get some cost estimates from ODA or cost data from ODHS that informed the study. And as Kara mentioned, I mean, Relief Nurseries has worked with ORAE. And I think Kara's probably tired of hearing me saying this, and she's aware, but we would definitely encourage Relief Nurseries to do more. And I think the value of what we did was to bring together external information, again, because similar programs have been studied over a long period of time, and we can use those to extrapolate about Relief Nurseries benefits, whereas ultimately ORAE can do that kind of thing, but it takes long follow-up to be able to say conclusively, based on, say, ORAE data, that Relief Nurseries have a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year benefit further down the road.
Great. I don't know if we have time for about one more question, and then I'll just conclude us with some last thoughts. I don't see any questions coming into the chat. So again, first of all, I want to thank Andrew and Angelica for your teams. I know there was lots of people working on this project. We've been working on it for a while, it feels like. Yep. More than a year. So I appreciate your work on this. I would recommend, if there are other programs out there, other folks from around the state, if you're looking for this kind of work, I highly recommend ECONorthwest. They are delightful to work with, very professional, and it was just a great opportunity for the association to have this study done. So some next steps that I would, from where I sit, looking forward, Andrew has made it clear, more research. My network is not surprised to hear me say this, but having a rigorous study, particularly, for those of you who are on the call that are connected to individuals who are interested in investing in doing better work, knowing more about Relief Nursery. We would love to be partnered with you in making sure that we can demonstrate outcomes. In those outcomes, the network, we have a research agenda. We are very curious about the impact on long-term outcomes for children and over the life course. Again, we've been operating Relief Nurseries since 1976. We've got a lot of longitudinal data that we could pull from, and would love to investigate that. What are those long-term outcomes? We know what families tell us. We've got Relief Nursery participants who were in the Relief Nursery, currently working at Relief Nurseries. Check out Family Building Blocks on YouTube, their socials. So you can see a lovely video of that coming full circle of children now working at Relief Nurseries. It's just delightful to hear that story. But what's the data show? So looking at what is the impact of Relief Nursery services on the different populations as we look at race and ethnicity and rural and frontier and urban Relief Nurseries. How can we do it better? That's what always is motivating our research, is how do we get better? How do we listen to families and make sure that we are providing the services that actually make a difference? And then the research helps us verify that, yes, we are making a difference in the lives of families. So more research, for sure. I think there's messaging to be had for policymakers when we're looking at public policy. I know some of my colleagues from the Early Childhood Coalition are on here. I hope that this adds to our case statement for invest early and invest often. We are part of a network of lots of early childhood programs from many different providers, and together we can change Oregon. So we're hoping that this will be part of what we can change for policy. And then, of course, expanding and investing in Relief Nurseries. We're in about 20 counties right now. We have 38 sites around the state, and we don't think that is enough. And we'd love to see more Relief Nurseries in more areas of the state, and to partner with folks to help us make sure that we stand those up. So those are some of the next steps. Would love to, I put my email in the chat for those who would like to be connected to Relief Nurseries, would like to know more, would like to sit down, and you can go to our website, OregonReliefNurseries.org, and find out more data. That's where you can find this study, and this recording will be out there. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, ECONorthwest, for this, and we'll let you guys get back to your day.